So we'll go ahead and kick it off. Good morning. Welcome to the Delta Stewardship Council meeting. It is 9:41 on Thursday, March 26th, 2026. We are here at the California Natural Resources Building in Sacramento, California. My name is Julie Lee, and I'm chair of the Delta Stewardship Council. Next, Emma is going to explain how the public can participate in this meeting. Emma?
If any member of the public is interested in providing public comment on any agenda item during today's meeting, please send an email to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov as seen on the screen. Be sure to note a name and the agenda item you wish to speak on. When called, the clerk will unmute you.
In accordance with our Bagley-Keene requirements, we'll now conduct a roll call of in-person council members to establish a quorum, which we will now have, so ignore everything I said about the advisory meeting. Emma, can you lead us in a roll call for in-person council members?
Councilmember Burgess.
Here.
Councilmember Maranian.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here.
We have an in-person quorum.
Right, and for our remote council members, please disclose if there are other individuals over the age of 18 with you and a brief description of their relationship to you. Additionally, please remain on camera for the duration of this meeting if possible. Emma, can you lead us in a roll call of the remote council members?
Councilmember Eggman.
Here.
Councilmember Zingali.
Here.
All right, thank you. We have a quorum. Next.
Excuse me, Chair Lee, just a brief statement. I'm not sure that it was addressed with respect to whether there's adults present.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have to state whether or not there's adults present.
There are no adults present.
All right, thank you.
None here in Eureka.
Thank you very much. All right, our next agenda item is public comment. This item is for the public to comment on any topic that is not on the council's agenda. Any comments on items on the agenda will be taken during that item. Emma, do we have any public comments for items not on today's agenda?
We do not, Madam Chair. I want to note we have received written public comments since our last meeting, and those are available at the back table in the room and online.
Excellent, thank you. Next up, we have the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar. The adoption of the January 22nd, 2026 meeting summary, the adoption of the February 26th and 27th, 2026 meeting summary, and third, the consideration and possible approval of an amendment to a receivable agreement DSC 20231A2 with the California Department of Natural Resources for scientific review. Before we vote, I'll ask if there's any public comment on the items on the consent calendar.
There is no public comment, Madam Chair.
All right. And do I need to ask Daniel and Susan, since their locations aren't noticed? I don't need to ask them about that. Okay, thank you. All right, if not, since we have no public comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve these items.
Move approval.
Thank you, Maria.
Second.
Second by Gail. All right, we will proceed with a roll call vote.
Councilmember Burgess.
Aye.
Burgess, aye. Councilmember Eggman.
Aye.
Eggman, aye. Councilmember Maranian.
Aye.
Maranian, aye. Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
Miller, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Aye.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Lee, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you. Next, we have the chair's report. I just have a couple of things to note. I want to thank everybody for the great meeting in February 1st. We had that 2-day hearing, and we had a lot of staff that put a lot of work into getting ready for that. It went very, very well, so thanks for all that, and thanks for all the work that you're continuing to do on that topic. February 28th, the day after the 2-day hearing, the passport kickoff for the National Heritage Area happened in Rio Vista. So I brought my grandkids and I saw Diane there. We listened to Representative Garamendi, who kicked off the passport program. If you've never heard of it, National Parks has a passport that you can get and take to parks and heritage areas and get a stamp on them, just like you do your regular passport when you travel outside the country. So a lot of people like to do that, and this kicked off the passport program. There's already 27 locations in the Delta where you can get your national park passport stamped with the Delta NHA stamp. Most of the libraries and museums, if you don't have a passport, you can pick one up at the John Muir National Historic Site in Martinez, and you can also order them online. And they also have passport stamp locations at the Clarksburg Schoolhouse, the Benicia Capitol Historic State Park, Big Break in Oakley, and some other places as well. And then yesterday was the National Heritage Area Advisory Committee meeting that I attended, where they had an update on the passport program and the partnership program. And they also talked about the fiscal year funding that was approved by the federal government, so they were able to get $500,000 for the federal fiscal year, which will then go into the state budget. So that's a great amount for them. So we're really excited about the heritage area and promoting that and letting people know about it. March 5th, we had a Blue Carbon Symposium in partnership with UC Davis. Lisa Marie may be talking more about that when she gives her presentation. I listened to it. It was even understandable to me, some parts of it. I thought it was very, very interesting. I learned a lot about blue carbon, which is a nature-based solution, and that coastal areas accumulate carbon faster than other areas. It can happen in marshes and mangroves and seagrasses, so I feel very educated about blue carbon, and it was really good. So we'll look forward to hearing a little bit more about that from you. And then March 19th, the ISB held their monthly meeting in Clarksburg, and topics included the California Sea Grant State Fellowship Reflections from Jonathan Huang, Interagency Ecological Program Workshop Reflections, and a Contaminants Monitoring Review, as well as a summary of the Emerging Climate Science Symposium and brainstorming about nature-based solutions. So does anyone else have anything to add to the chair's report? Diane? Sure, yeah.
Yeah, at the last Delta Protection Commission meeting, we had a really interesting report from the Department of Fish and Wildlife Environmental Program Manager, Martha Volkoff, and also representatives from Assemblymember Rhodesia Ransom discussing golden mussel updates. Mm-hmm. And I would like to encourage us to get a similar presentation. It was updating what we know and kind of the breadth of where they're finding it now and what they're learning and how they're dealing with it. So that was interesting. As you said, we've received more funding for the NHA, which means we now have a 3/4 of a time staff person for that instead of half-time. So, woohoo! And then and then a big thank you to Audrey for showing up to the NHA event in Rio Vista, and also for giving legislative updates to the Delta Protection Commission. They also were able to provide a presentation on the 2026 work plan and brought forth the 2025 annual report with our new executive director. They are catching up after having to also deal with the, all the work that goes with the conveyance. So I'm really proud of the work that they're doing over there. So that's my report.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair, there are not.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the Executive Officer's Report. And I'll turn it over to Jessica Pearson.
Good morning, thank you. I also want to thank everyone who participated in our 2-day hearing last month. As a reminder, we are in the middle of our statutory process of hearing appeals that were filed for the Department of Water Resources Delta Conveyance Project Certification of Consistency. The council anticipates making its determination within 60 days of the February hearing and will provide advance notice of the details of our next meeting date, time, and location. As a reminder, we remain under ex parte communication restriction regarding this project until the council formally acts on the appeals. While the hearing portion has concluded, the council is still accepting written comments from the public on the matter. Please submit those and any questions you might have about the process to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov. Since our last regular meeting in January, we've sent quite a few letters out that I want to catch you up on, and these are all in your packet. On February 2nd, the council staff sent 2 comment letters, one to the State Water Board commenting on key elements of the revised Bay Delta Plan draft. We focused mainly on scientific and peer review for program implementation in our letter. We sent another letter to the San Joaquin Area Flood Control Agency recommending changes to their Mossdale Tract Flood Risk Reduction Project to strengthen alignment with the Delta Plan. On February 17th, a letter was sent to Reclamation District 756 regarding the Bolden Island Levee Setback Project, which supports habitat creation, levee rehabilitation, and pump station replacement, and we invited them to engage in early consultation with council staff. On March 6th, we sent a letter to Reclamation District 799 on their Hotchkiss Tract Levee Rehabilitation Project. This aims to improve levee segments and enhance tidal marsh habitat. The letter encourages early engagement and discussion of mitigation measures for Delta Plan consistency. On March 18th, we provided feedback on the Department of Water Resources Tides End Multi-Benefit Restoration Project. This focuses on wetland restoration and floodplain enhancement in the Yolo bypass. The Tides End project is identified as an early action project in the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program, and staff recommended early consultation ahead of future certification. And then finally, on March 23rd, Chair Julie Lee sent a letter to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to request information regarding data from a set of water quality and flow gauges that are located at sites throughout the Delta. The contract for this monitoring effort recently changed hands, and beginning in October 2025, there was a period where the data was not publicly available. So in the letter, the chair asked for a meeting with Reclamation to better understand their approach to the future management of those monitoring stations to ensure that the Delta water quality data remains publicly accessible. Next, in personnel announcements, I'd like to briefly welcome our new cohort of 5 Sea Grant Fellows who have joined us over the past 2 months. Alyssa Burns, Addison Gleekle, Melissa Palmachano, Jesse Potzlaff, and Braden Wiley. And Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers will be introducing them a little bit more extensively during her lead scientist report. But welcome to our new fellows. Also in your packet, we have our outreach highlights report and our active projects lists, which are continuously updated. A few highlights across all of our communication platforms in February. It was once again people-oriented content that received the most attention. Our email announcing Councilmember Eggman's welcome and reappointments of Chair Lee, Moranian, and Patterson had the highest click-through rate this month. And the most popular Instagram post marked International Day of Women and Girls in Science, featuring Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers and promoting our research funding page. Finally, our webcast report highlights public meetings that we live stream and archive on YouTube, and February's hearing garnered so far over 200 archive views. Next, I'd like to invite Dan Constable, Environmental Program Manager in our Planning Division, up to the table. And we're going to talk about the Delta Atlas. So the council has launched an interactive Delta Atlas, which is going to make the region's geography easier to visualize and aid with planning efforts in the Delta. As Dan Constable will explain, this free online mapping tool is designed for staff, project proponents, and the public to use. And it really improves on previous black and white maps that we had in the back of the Delta Plan. It offers a user-friendly interface, and it has unique information like Delta Plan policy layers and also contextual information like public lands. Users can display data, search locations, they can add place marks and sketches, and they can export maps. So Dan is going to give us a mini preview of the Delta Atlas. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. We're going to pull up a video, and I'm going to talk through what's going to be on your screen. Apologies in advance for everyone in the room. The text is quite small on the screen. For folks online, you'll be able to see this in much more detail. And as I'll announce at the end, if you're interested in seeing the atlas itself, the URL for that was released and is currently on a banner on our website. So if we can pull up the video, please. Great. Thank you. So the Delta Stewardship Council is making it easier to visualize the Delta's geography with a public online atlas. We built the online Delta Atlas to provide a way for both council staff and the public to find locations, access data, and make a basic map with no specialized software or technical knowledge required. The atlas brings together key spatial data for the Delta in one place. Whether you're a member of the public or staff, this tool was made for you. And again, if you have this in front of you on your own screen, you'll be able to see this a little bit better. Before we look at the atlas, there's an important disclaimer shown here. We are providing this as a service, but it is not a regulatory tool. For regulatory aspects of the Delta plan, please see relevant regulatory text. One of the most common questions we get for data access is for a copy of the legal Delta boundary and help determining if a location is within the Delta. The atlas makes this easy to answer, but it can do much more. Let's take a look at some examples to see how the atlas sets this apart. The legal Delta and Sassoon Marsh are shown here when it first loads. There's administrative boundaries, things like cities, legacy communities, and the primary Delta. There's also layers that can help visualize Delta plan policies. Just as an example, things like the priority habitat restoration zones, which is associated with a policy, and regulated streams. These are unique to the atlas. Unlike other tools which focus on more general or statewide assets, the atlas can help visualize Delta plan policies that previously were difficult to associate with a location on a map. So let's take a look at an example of what this looks like in practice. Say if you're interested in a location, you have an address or a set of coordinates, but don't know if it is in the Delta. Here I'm going to search for a common location. You know the answer, but if you didn't, this is Staten Island. We'll zoom in a little bit. Great. Now let's say we want to understand more about this site. We can take an elevation transect. You can see kind of a cross-section at the bottom if you're going across water surface, up a levee, dropping down below sea level, back up the other levee, and over to water surface on the other side. We could also measure the area. Here we'll change the base map so we can get a better understanding of what's actually on the landscape here. Find a field and measure it. Currently, it looks like this is showing square feet, which I don't understand very well, so we'll change the units to acres, and it updates on the fly. Great. Let's take a look at another example. Another anticipated use for the atlas is for organizations that may be planning a project in the Delta. Organizations like a county resources conservation district or a small nonprofit entity may not have the software or staff capacity at all times available to create a map. In this example, let's say we're one of these organizations interested in creating a map for a site. I'm going to zoom into these coordinates, and I should note that this is an existing restoration site. We're just using it as an example. We can add layers to learn more about the ownership in this area. Here we're going to turn on a public lands data set. I can't see what's under very well, so on the fly we can actually address what it looks like, the appearance, and make it more transparent so we can still see what's underlying this area. We can also swipe back and forth if we want to get an idea what's there, again, on the fly. We can add another Delta plan policy. This one is showing areas where you might want to consider setting back a levee for certain types of projects. Again, just an example, and it looks like we're in one of those areas. We can pull that on top of the other layer so we can see it more easily, and again, see what's on the landscape in this area. Now, if we want to create a map, this is just a very basic example, but we can put a sketch on the landscape. If we wanted, we could change the colors and transparency. We'll add a label. Change the color, and drop that over onto the map. And this site is laid out so it might not print very well if we were printing on a standard piece of paper, so we'll rotate in the browser and change the location of that label again. We can then choose the area that we want to be on our map. Selected. And great. Now we have a map we can download, has the legend there in the lower left of whatever layers were being shown at the moment. Lastly, we incorporated accessibility features. The atlas uses best practices that make it navigable with a screen reader, and it has some features shown here, like keyboard shortcuts. We'll take this off real quick. Up in the upper left. And it also has some basic multilingual capabilities for the menus that you can change with a few languages. So these maps are helpful visuals, but they can also help communicate policies relevant to land use, development, and restoration in the Delta. For example, understanding whether a project falls within the legal Delta can be important for project planning. Next, we are working to make the underlying data easily available via the California Natural Resources Open Data Portal, which provides an easy way to find and access data to anyone online. The online Delta Atlas is free and publicly available. The web address is available on our website, in a blog we posted earlier this week, and an email listserv that was sent out on Tuesday. We invite you to explore it for yourself, and if you have questions or feedback, our staff is here to help. And thank you.
That was awesome. Yeah,
Applause is not necessary, but thank you.
nice. No. Yeah, no, we love maps. That was incredible, and I can only imagine how useful that's going to be to everyone. So great presentation. Thanks, Dan. Does anyone have any questions? Diane?
Yeah, I was going to say, just to brag, this was an in-house tool that was developed with Dan's leadership, so pretty impressive.
Really cool. So, can we overlay or incorporate like the different county or city or special district, like parcels, labels, or any of those kind of things?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I didn't show all of the layers. Counties actually are there, and parcels are as well. I should note there are some limitations on those. We pull those in from a public service, and that helps us maintain requirements complying with anonymity, so we can't post people's names and everything all at the same time on a parcel. But if you zoom in, it will show you the parcel outlines. One of the most common requests when we were circulating this internally for feedback was, hey, can you add layer X, where it was congressional district or whatever that may be. Yes, we certainly can add more things. For this version, we released it with a focus on it being more streamlined and less overwhelming, but we could do a couple things. We can either add key data sets directly, or we could create a version where users are able to pull in and basically add whatever they want online and create their own maps with it.
I always encourage people to be curious, and so this is like the perfect tool for people to be curious with. And when I asked, well, does it do this? It wasn't me saying, well, you didn't do this. I'm just saying, is it possible? And so I just want to, I'm really impressed by this, and thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Could I make?
Oh, were there more
I
questions?
think, there's the California Water Atlas from 1979, and I think just seeing this progress and how you were able to create something so phenomenal that people can use and really start to understand water really is, just like that same almost 50 years ago Atlas is used to this day. It's just this incredible legacy that I think helps explain so much about the Delta and our whole water system. So congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And thank you to all the staff and support we've gotten internally to test this and put it together.
I have one more. I'm just curious, who would be so interested in using? The developers, who would, and I'm interested. I'm an urban planner, and I love this kind of stuff, but I want to know who else loves it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know exactly. Jessica Pearson mentioned that our kind of anticipated audience is staff, the general public, and people that may be proposing a project in the Delta.
Yeah, proposing projects.
Yeah. One of the reasons we developed as staff is we have this question very often of, there's this project proposed, where exactly is it? We just have coordinates. And so this helps us really easily use it internally. And then we thought, hey, if we're making this, let's make it publicly available, because other people have these questions.
Yeah.
The other part of that is the project proponents is that we do get applications sometimes from smaller organizations, like I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so that was a key use of how can we make this more accessible and transparent to people who may be doing this. They don't have to go and buy software and have a full-time staff that's doing mapping.
Congratulations, it's a great tool.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next, I'm going to invite Audrey Cho, our Legislative and Policy Advisor, for a brief update.
Do you have any maps for us, Audrey?
Do you know what? The Eco Atlas is a hard act to follow, so I'll try and be entertaining to you all. I really will. If we can get my slides up, please. Thank you so much. So good morning, Chair and council members. It's been a while since I've had the chance to update you, so we have a lot to get through. On February 17th, Chair Lee and lead engineer Aaron Mullen briefed members and staff of the legislature's Delta Caucus. This briefing was specifically requested by Senator McNerney's office, who is the caucus's co-chair, and the senator was actually able to kick off the meeting, and we fielded questions from Assemblymember Lori Wilson as well, who is also a co-chair, as well as various Delta Caucus staff. We aimed to impress the importance of the Delta to the entire state, as well as the vital role that levees play in protecting people, property, water supply, and the Delta as a place. We also touched on emerging climate science, which demonstrates growing flood risk with climate change, and the council's role through the Delta Levees investment strategy, which uses a risk-based prioritization system to target levee investments where they're most urgently needed in the Delta. Thank you to Chair Lee and Aaron Mullen, as well as the Water Resources Engineering team for your collaboration on this briefing. Okay, so as Chair Burgess mentioned, or as Member Burgess mentioned on February 28th, there was a launch of the Delta National Heritage Area Passport Program, and so Chair Lee was present, and there's just a picture here for you to see as well. Congressman John Garamendi kicked off the event, and really it was a great time, so was glad to be there. Moving into bill updates, the legislature is certainly in full swing. The deadline for new bills to be introduced was February 20th, and the legislature introduced just over 1,900 bills this year. Upon adjournment today, the legislature will begin its spring recess and reconvene on April 6th. Starting with SB 872 by Senator McNerney, this bill would establish a new Delta Levees and Canal Subsidence Fund in the state treasury to fund the following allocations over the next 20 years. First, $150 million annually to the Department of Water Resources to support capital improvements of state water conveyance systems affected by subsidence. And then second, $150 million annually to the Delta Conservancy for levee improvements in the Delta, as well as habitat improvement projects. This bill is supported by a very broad coalition of stakeholders, including the state water contractors, Restore the Delta, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the Sierra Club, and some 60 others. AB 2216 by Assemblymember Aguiar Curry would rename the Delta Conservancy as the Valley and Delta Conservancy and expand their jurisdiction to cover the remainder of Yolo, Sacramento, Solano, and San Joaquin counties outside of the legal Delta and Sassoon Marsh. This bill is sponsored by the Nature Conservancy, and the intent here is to expand the area receiving benefits from the Conservancy and to support larger watershed-scale projects and new funding sources. We also have AB 2218 by Assemblymember Kalra. This bill would add language to the Water Code declaring that it's the established policy of the state to acknowledge and correct inequities inflicted upon California Native American tribes through compensation, legal recognition of rights, or replacement of benefits lost. This bill would encourage all relevant state agencies to consider and incorporate this policy when revising permits, policies, grants, and the like. Moving into some golden mussel-focused bills, AB 1772 by Assemblymember Pappen lays out strategies for golden mussel control. The bill requires water supply system operators to update plans to address invasive species. It also requires the Department of Fish and Wildlife to develop a voluntary framework to prevent the spread of mussels, including things like a minimum decontamination and inspection standard. And it also notes intent to identify alternative funding sources outside of fees that are imposed on recreators, like fees on international cargo shipping, for example. AB 2032 by Assemblymember Ransom is another golden mussel bill which focuses more so on the barriers faced by water agencies in controlling the mussel problem in real time. This bill would exempt public or private water agencies from the requirement to obtain certain permits from the Department of Fish and Wildlife if those permits would be used to control the spread of mussels. It would also expedite certain permit processing by other agencies if used under these same circumstances. There are also other provisions regarding the adoption of best management practices and scientific guidance that agencies can take to address this issue. And then lastly, for our state bills of interest, we have SB 895, which would authorize a new foundation for science and health research to supply grants in specific research areas, including climate, weather, and agriculture and water. It would authorize an accompanying $23 billion bond to be placed on the November ballot. This bill is widely supported and co-authored by 36 members of the legislature across both houses, given the many rollbacks of federal funding for scientific research in California. Okay, moving into federal bills of interest, S3738, the More Water Act, was introduced on February 4th by Senator Padilla. This bill would reauthorize expiring Bureau of Reclamation programs to help support development of recycled water projects. It would also reauthorize a program that funds in-stream and floodplain habitat restoration and specifically calls out projects in the Sacramento River and its tributaries. And then lastly, it would create a new federal grant program for repairs to the California Aqueduct. I also wanted to share some new federal funding news. Just last week, the Department of Interior announced $540 million of funding for water projects in California. This funding comes from the H.R. 1 bill that was passed by Congress last summer, and spending is spread across the Delta-Mendota Canal, the Friant-Kern Canal, and the San Luis Canal for repairs from land subsidence or compaction due to groundwater overdraft. All right. As you are likely aware, a partial government shutdown began on February 14th, affecting the Department of Homeland Security. I do want to note that the Federal Emergency Management Agency's National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, which has been a topic of conversation at previous meetings, is not currently affected by this shutdown because it was reauthorized through September of 2026 at the tail end of the last shutdown. And then lastly, I'll wrap up with an update on federal staffing levels. Data on staffing at federal agencies has been long awaited and is now available through the Office of Personnel Management. Following various deferred resignation offerings, cuts to probationary staff, and other reduction in force initiatives, overall data highlights that 264,228 federal employees have left service since January 20th, 2025. This outlook is particularly difficult for the science agencies. We see a 30% reduction at the National Science Foundation, a 20% reduction at the Geological Survey and the Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and then a 15% reduction at the Bureau of Reclamation, as well as particular strain on the California Bureau of Reclamation offices. I'll note that these are conservative estimates because data may not reflect more recent rounds of deferred resignations. And on that not so happy note, I'll close and I'm happy to take any of your questions.
Yes, Diane?
Is there going to be any recommendation or discussion about supporting some of these state efforts, like the SB 872, the ones related to golden mussels? Is that something that we will consider?
I don't think we're at that point yet in the session, but I defer to Audrey. I believe all those bills are undergoing some changes, so I would recommend that we wait until there's a little bit more stability.
Yeah, so all of the bills that I mentioned are currently in their first house, and so undergoing committee hearings. Some of them have not yet had their first committee hearing, and so certainly a conversation that we can keep open for the future.
The only other thing is I know that there were some monitoring that went from US Geology, you know what I'm talking about, and it's gone to a consulting firm. Has all of that monitoring gotten upgraded to it being, no, it's not. Okay.
So Chair Lee actually sent a letter on that exact topic just a couple of days ago. And so in your board packet, there should be a copy of that, which has hopefully the most up-to-date information regarding that particular contract handover.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's coming. And the reason why I asked is it's related to the federal
Right.
staffing and
Of
all
course.
of that, so that's why I asked.
Yeah.
So, all right, thank you. Thank you.
All right, no other questions? Nobody online? Right, back to Jessica.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to wrap up with a look ahead to the rest of today's agenda. Next, we'll hear our Delta Lead Scientist report, which features 2 guest speakers for an overview of the recent San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary LiDAR elevation mapping effort, which is co-funded by the council. Then we're going to hear from the California Department of Food and Agriculture, presenting on their Healthy Soils program and a discussion about how that relates to reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the Delta. And then finally, we will hear from the Department of Water Resources about new legislative direction regarding the next California Water Plan, the state's long-term strategy for managing, protecting, and using its water. So I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, that concludes my executive officer's report.
All right, do any members have questions for Jessica? Nope, all right. Emma, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Next, we'll move on to our lead scientist report, so I'll introduce Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers.
Thank you, Chair Lee and council members. If Alex and Arena can come up to the dais, I'm excited to share a different kind of update today. And the fact that I'm hearing that you like maps, you're going to love this. This isn't I'll do this before we have our typical monthly science program updates. So this is not yet a published product, but it is an early look at the LiDAR-derived elevation data that was collected with a plane last summer, you might remember. And it's literally shining a light on the Delta that we have today. So a real important update. And they've got their name tag, great. So Megan Nguyen from our science program is online. I think I see her, there she is, great. She will kick off the presentation with a then and now perspective. And then we have here in the room a panel of experts from Department of Water Resources. We have Irina Ushakova. And from the San Francisco Estuary Institute, we have Alex Bro to show you this new view of the landscape and where we are in the process of making the first ever seamless elevation map of the estuary. So let's turn it over now to Megan.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa Marie. I guess I could take a moment until the presentation's on the board. Thanks. Yeah, hi, I'm Megan. I helped manage the contract for this effort alongside project managers from each of our partner organizations. And together, we kept a project of this scale on time and on track. So next slide. I'm really excited to be here and tell you the story on how this all began, why now, why it matters, and how we accomplished it. So an update to the elevation map of the entire Bay Delta estuary has been needed for years, but the people, funding, and coordination to make it happen had never come together at the same time. Last February, that changed. Us, the council, and 3 other organizations that I'll get into saw a window and they took it. But to understand why it mattered, we need to understand what the problem we were trying to solve. So we can see on this map, it's a patchwork. So prior to now, this map shows what elevation map looking efforts look like the last 8 years, a patchwork. For decades, every time someone needed an elevation data in the Bay Delta, they went out and collected on their own, using their own equipment, their own standards, their own patch of geography, taken at different times. The result was a patchwork that didn't really fit together cleanly. You can think of it like a quilt made from different types of scraps. Technically, it covered the bed, but it doesn't give you a clear picture of everything. So if you only cared about your site, that worked just fine. But if you wanted to study the entire system, understand how the water moves from the bay to the delta, from the delta to the bay, where that flood risk concentrates, how restoration decisions has rippled across the estuary, we need a consistent, high-quality map of the whole thing, not just a patchwork. So everyone was collecting pieces, but nobody was building the whole picture until now. Next slide, please. So I want to put in perspective of renovating your house, right? You put new floors in, you rebuilt the foundation, and then you have an inspector evaluate your work using photos taken before the construction even started. That inspection wouldn't reflect the reality of all of that work you put into your home. And that's just what we'd be doing if we continued using the outdated data from over the last 8 years. So as we know, the Bay Delta does not stand still, even today. We have experienced storms that have caused levee breaching. We have also intentionally breached levees for the intention of restoring sites. Meanwhile, sea levels keep rising, which impacts flooding of major infrastructure areas. I can point you to this slide and say that in 2023, we had storms that caused a breaching in the Costas River levee. In 2024, just a couple of years ago, we breached the levee for the Lookout Sleeve Restoration Project. And just this past year, we had heavy rains that flooded the Highway 101 in Marin County. Next slide, please. So we need this map. And we worked together last spring when Wetland Regional Monitoring Program got funding to map the Bay at first, right? And they recognized the opportunity that with additional funding, that the collection could be expanded to collect the elevation data for not just the bay, but also the entire Bay Delta estuary. So they approached us with that idea because of our role in helping fund projects that fill the gaps and glues needed just for projects like this at the council. So we needed an update, and we wanted to do it right. So together with us, the council, the Wetland Regional Monitoring Program, California Department of Water Resources, San Francisco Estuary Institute, we pulled our resources together and mapped the entire Bay Delta at once using the same equipment, the same standards, the same approach from start to finish. This included consistent water conditions, collecting the data during summer low tide and low water. I want to give a shout out to our contractors, which is NV5 and GIDA, who flew the planes, took the LiDAR data, and did the surveying on the ground. Next slide, please. So here is the big reveal of what that seamless elevation map looks like based on our preliminary data so far, and how beautiful it is. So one map built together for the entire estuary. So for the first time, everyone in the Bay Delta, flood engineers, habitat scientists, infrastructure planners, the public, and more will be looking at the same map, and the map that shows the landscape as it actually exists today. Next slide, please. So here's an example of an impressive renovation that we made back in started in 2021, I believe. And it wouldn't have been captured if not for this elevation map update, which is the restoration at Dutch Slough. So you can see here that the 2017 LiDAR versus the 2025 LiDAR. So previously, Dutch Slough used to be like a farmland that was turned into a restoration site, where you can see in 2025 where those levee breaches are. So the dark purple is where the low water is. And as you can see, when those levees are broken, that water was able to seep through that Dutch Slough site. Obviously, things have greatly changed on the ground between the two. We have tidal drainage system growing with finer resolutions, resolving things like tidal creeks, channels, and vegetation. How cool. In addition, next slide, please. So what was also really important about this data collection is it didn't happen just any time during the year. We chose to do it during the summer season, which meant that it allowed us to collect the data at low tide and low water. This maximizes the detail we can see from the river channels, waterways, down to the underlying terrain. So to get a little deeper into what this data makes possible, let's find out what LiDAR actually is. So I'm going to hand it over to Irina Ushakova and Alex Rowe, who are going to walk us through the LiDAR 101, value of elevation data, and explain what the quality standards mean in practice. Thank you. Next.
Alrighty, nice to meet you. I'm really excited to be a part of this project. My name is Irina Ushakova, and I'm a land surveyor over at the Department of Water Resources in the geomatics branch. So DWR's part in this project is we did a lot of the quality control to make sure that we're getting the best data possible. So let's first take a look at what LiDAR is. So you may have heard of it from your phones. It's on self-driving cars, and in our case, we use it for elevation mapping. So for this project, we used a LiDAR sensor that's mounted on a fixed-wing aircraft, similar to the one that's pictured there. The sensor sends out a pulse from the laser and then records the return, and that measures the distance to create the raw data. Once that raw data is collected, it's processed using motion data from the aircraft and then adjusted using boots-on-the-ground surveys. This ensures that we're getting accurate data from the sensor and providing the best quality data to our stakeholders. So what's the value of LiDAR data? So you actually saw the Delta Atlas in a previous presentation, and that data has to come from somewhere. So LiDAR data can feed a lot of analyses and track elevation changes over time. Here on the left, you'll see a photo of what my computer looks like when I'm working. This is a point cloud of Dutch Slough, so it's color-coded by classification. The pink points represent the ground, and the green points represent the vegetation. So the pink points are used for creating the digital elevation models that Megan showed in the images before. So this data is essential for a variety of stakeholders and decision makers. It can be used to track elevation changes over time and account for ground motion and subsidence. This is a region that experiences a lot of movement, so regular data updates are critical. This data set also gathers features such as vegetation and structures, which can be helpful for creating system-wide analyses.
Essentially, it's a 3D snapshot in time of the region that's helpful for engineers, ecologists, and policymakers.
Thanks, Arena. Hi, I'm Alex Bro. I'm a coastal geospatial scientist at the San Francisco Estuary Institute. I was part of the team working on behalf of the San Francisco Estuary Wetlands Regional Monitoring Program that helped bring this collaboration together, connecting the Bay with the Delta. I grew up in South Louisiana, and I got into this line of work through my experiences with hurricanes, including Hurricane Katrina. We just passed the 20-year anniversary, and while there were many failures that contributed to that disaster, one of the painful lessons was that levee systems weren't accurately monitored and constructed, creating a false sense of security for the communities depending on them. That's something I carry with me in this work, particularly when thinking about sea level rise and the communities here that rely on similar structures. When I think about flood risk, there are two major components. A lot of worthwhile effort goes into evaluating and predicting water levels. However, we must not forget that accurate elevation data is the other half of the flood risk equation. This image shows a graphic representation of evaluating water levels and waves with neighboring homes protected by a levee. We have good data and monitoring of water levels, as demonstrated on the left, showing observed water levels at the I Street Bridge. The image on the right is from the LiDAR data set, shows a cross-section in an area near Stockton. We can see White Slough on the left and a recently developed subdivision on the right. We can see that the base of the new development is lower than the water level at the time of the collection. This new LiDAR data set contributes two major things. First, it helps us identify vulnerable low spots, particularly places where floodwaters could breach or overtop a levee. Second, comparing it against previous collections helps us track how the ground itself is changing over time, whether it be erosion, land subsidence, or impacts from new construction. And in the image on the top, you can see development hasn't yet occurred. This is from 2017. While in 2025, just below, the street network and homes have now been built. In the image on the bottom right, you can see places of change between the two data sets. Blue showing areas of added elevation and red showing areas of lost elevation. I've spent my career trying to provide the kind of data analysis that leads to smarter decisions. This is a good example of that. Data that gives engineers, planners, and decision makers a common, accurate foundation to better prioritize where to adapt. And I'm proud to have contributed to it. And with that, I'll pass it back to Lisa Marie.
Where's that development?
Sorry.
Where's that development?
Near Stockton, I believe the West Lake.
Great. So thank you, Alex and Arena. I think you can see now that there's a lot of potential uses for these updated series of maps, including the new Delta Atlas that Dan just presented. So we've got this data, and so from here, I expect that the quality assurance process will be done in the next few months, and things will be released later in summer. The first map should probably be going up in July or August, and that will include the California Natural Resources Agency's open data portal. Eventually, the maps will make it to federal websites like NOAA's Digital Coast and USGS's National Map, where you could do more regional analyses and look at any scale you want. So I want to highlight our role. Facilitating these kinds of foundational layers is how the science program builds out our community, so that we're all looking at the same high-quality maps, and people don't necessarily stay in their small boxes and their small corners, but they can work across the landscape at issues that we all care about, like predicting water movement and mixing, prioritizing sites for ecosystem restoration, modeling flood risk, and ultimately tracking rates and directions of change, which is especially important where investments have been made on levees or crops or with wetland restoration. And I hope this is the start of regular elevation updates using remote sensing tools, because there's natural forces and human decisions leading, like wetland restoration and so on, that are leading to changes every day. Agricultural practices that lead to soil subsidence is another thing that we can track, and these updated maps are foundational for that. You're going to hear in the next agenda item about healthy soils, which focuses on stopping subsidence and its resulting carbon dioxide emissions. They're going to focus on an alternative land use, which would be rice agriculture. Could definitely use these maps. We're happy to take any questions about these. And we've got 2 experts in the room, and Megan Nguyen online, who's really seen this from the beginning till the end. It was a year ago, effectively today, that we had all the partners on board and got this project moving. So yeah, questions are welcome, and so thank you, council members.
Maria?
Yeah, I just want to appreciate, not only the technical expertise, but the passion and thoughtfulness behind what you guys did. And thank you for doing that. I think it's something very valuable. Thanks.
Yes, Diane?
So the first thing I want to just kind of highlight is that this is the San Francisco Bay Delta Estuary. So it is 2 systems that, interact regularly, but often are looked at in one way. And so to bring it together, I think is really important. As someone that represents an area that is right there between those 2, when we're talking about all of the different things related to the uses for this, we're talking about sea level rise, we're talking about delta flow, we're talking about flooding, we're talking about droughts, we're talking about levees, and we're talking about, shipping channels. I mean, it's just a big system that interacts with each other. And so this is a really important tool, and kind of going back to what Audrey was talking about, where we're talking about investing in the science and the monitoring, it's really important that we do this. We've talked about adaptive management, and when we are dealing with all of the different scenarios you were talking about, whether it's an earthquake or erosion or flooding or doing a restoration project, in order to have that data and be able to monitor it, and if it's not working, how to figure it out in a quicker time rather than having it fail in a bad way. This tool is super important. And so I was thinking about the fact that, often we're looking at the hydrology of water coming down or sea level rise, in order to know, we know how fast something's going, but if we know the land, we know the structure of how it's operating, that gives us a lot more information as well. And the other thing here in California and locally that we really need to realize is that there is less certainty that in situations where, say, there is an earthquake or there is a flood or there is a delta levee failure or, FEMA's not necessarily going to be able to show up. So the more prepared and aware that we are to be able to get ahead of things and to manage it ahead of time, this is that kind of a tool. And I think the other thing is, as technology expands, these kind of tools help us be able to access, say, AI that can do some different types of analysis with all of the other things that we're considering. So I think this was a wonderful investment. You could see that we were really excited about maps. This is going to elevate that, and I think it's also important that we are taking that kind of leadership role in California to, be proactive. Jeff, stop smiling. Keep smiling. I know. It's just me geeking out, and he's just appreciating it. So, I think this is a great tool. I look forward to how we're doing it, and I really like going back to my first thing, the fact that we're working on the Bay and the Delta together, I think is a really important element. Thank you.
Yeah, kudos to you guys for all the work involved in this. I can really see the value in having one very current set of data that everybody is working from as you're figuring out things like sea level rise and climate change, and having one baseline set of data for that is just going to be invaluable. So thank you very much. Lisa Marie?
Great. I just want to say thank you again to Alex and Arena for coming, and there will be highlights to share later when we get to explore, because we are all geeking out on this data. It's just so exciting. So there'll be a lot to share, I think, at a later council meeting. Thank you. All right, so let me just move forward with the rest of the updates. There's 3 updates and then 2 on your radars. We completed a peer review. So the 3 things to highlight are the peer review unit. We just completed one on the 2024 and 2025 incidental take exceedances of the Sacramento River winter run Chinook. It's a federally endangered species. The goal was to examine the actions and decisions that led to the loss trajectory of those 2 years and how that could be avoided in the future with additional monitoring or modeling. I'm really grateful to senior environmental scientist Elizabeth Brusati for stepping up from the adaptive management unit to lead this one. The 3-member panel released their very thorough 80-page report and made some very particularly useful suggestions to the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Water Resources about proactive management and monitoring and coordination to avoid coming up against this loss threshold again in the future, particularly the February-March time, which is a critical period. The report and all the materials, including the public comments, can be found at our Delta Science Program peer review website, the link being in your packet. So another peer review on spring run Chinook is actually on the juvenile production estimate, which is life cycle modeling, is ongoing right now for Department of Water Resources. And we had a successful public meeting in February. That should be released next month, and so perhaps I'll be reporting on that at the May council meeting. So the second report out is on our 5 new California Sea Grant State Fellows. We've been doing this for 13 years. We've had 50 fellows. Again, these are postgraduates that are interested in exploring a career in the public sector of science policy interface. Many of them are still working here in the Delta, and we had a matching event in September across all agencies, and we were lucky to get these 5. So I think in the room we have a couple people. Let's see, hopefully. No? Nobody came. Okay, next meeting. I'm going to make everybody come. So Alyssa Burns, she's in the Adaptive Management Unit Independent Science Board. She has a carbon background, and she's already, or I should say a biogeochemistry background. She's already involved in the contaminants monitoring review and the nature-based solutions scoping review. Addie Gleekle, she's in the Delta Plan Development, Implementation, and Policy Unit. She's already given support to this LiDAR product that you were looking at, as well as Audrey's news updates. Melissa Palmisano, she's in the Science, Communication, and Synthesis Unit, and she's already leading the follow-up to that Blue Carbon Symposium you heard about a little earlier, and we'll discuss a little in the future. And then Jessie Patzlaff, who is in the Research Funding Unit. She gave an IEP poster at the Interagency Ecological Program last week, so again, already getting started. And then Braden Wiley, who's in the Collaborative Science and Peer Review Unit, and he will actually be the lead on the next review that we're starting up this summer. So looking forward to working with all 5 of them. We're very lucky to have them. And then the third thing to highlight are some events that just happened. The Interagency Ecological Program annual workshop was last week in this building. It was well run, well attended. There were great plenaries on artificial intelligence and easy entry points to become more comfortable with AI as a tool. One person in particular, Trin Nguyen from the CDFW, Department of Fish and Wildlife, highlighted that don't think of it as AI, think of it as IA, intelligence augmentation. It's a tool that can help in some ways, but you still need your science. The well-designed and inclusive sessions included everything from golden mussels to contaminants to bathymetry to fish tracking. There were more than 50 posters. There were 12 art exhibits, and the Delta Science Program presented 3 presentations and 4 posters. The abstracts are online, and the recordings will be posted soon. So something to enjoy. I also want to call out the overlap last week with the cyanobacterial harmful algal blooms, or CHABs, annual workshop, which was something that we called for with the council's product, the 2024 CHABs monitoring strategy. And another thing to highlight was that in early March, there was this Blue Carbon Symposium that we co-hosted at UC Davis. It was about carbon accounting in the estuary, and I want to use that when I talk about our next agenda item. Things on your radar. April 20th to 22nd, right before your next council meeting, is the California Water and Environmental Modeling Forum, or what we call QEMF. There'll be a session on collaborative modeling in the Delta that highlights the 3 directions that we've been pursuing with teams here on forecasting and management options for salinity intrusion, harmful algal blooms, and tidal wetland food web restoration. And then finally, the big reveal, we finally have a date for the Bay Delta Science Conference. It's the last 3 days of September. So please save September 20th to 30th. It's just 6 months away for our flagship conference. It's in downtown Sacramento. Our theme this year, I think, really meets the moment. Opportunities of change, building and being the future. It's an exciting opportunity to learn about the latest research in the Delta, network with professionals, and contribute to the advancement of science-informed decision-making. The planning team is already busy, and it's led by our co-chairs, Letitia Grenier from the Public Policy Institute of California and Renee Henry from Trout Unlimited. And the registration and session submissions will be coming soon, posted online. Keep you posted. So that's the report, and before we go to by the numbers, I can take any questions. Okay, I think we have a graphic for this. All right. So I think we all know, because we live here, it's been whiplashy weather for the last few months. Through this all, we have some full and very actively managed reservoirs. Flows on the Sacramento and the San Joaquin are similar to February, a little higher than they were last March. And the only really big thing that's different here, and it is a really big thing, is the missing snowpack. Those warm rains that we had in February and what they call the snow eater heat waves, 15 to 30 degree Fahrenheit anomalies from the past, they're setting records everywhere. It really did one on our snowpack. It just decimated it. It's not as bad as the drought of 2015, apparently. Our snowpack's not as bad as then. But still, we're down a third, we're down to just a third of what's average for the state at this time. And as you can see here, in the northern and central Sierra, it's particularly low. So, really, this March is looking like what a May should look like. And technically, in history, April is when our snowpack is the highest. So, it's not looking good. But on the good side, the reservoirs are full. That's different than 2015. And there's a storm coming next week. So there's maybe 2 to 3 feet coming into the higher elevations. So not a whole lot different here except for the snowpack, but this is one to remember for the snowpack loss. That was super fast, and it stands out in the record as a very fast melt. I think the other thing to get ready for is just, we have this projected low to no snow future, so this gives us a little glimpse of what that might look like. So I can take any questions.
All right, any questions? Yes, Diane.
So are they, on reservoir storage, are they adjusting?
Yes.
Like keeping more water because of the snowpack situation? Or can they only do so much because the capacity?
Yeah, they can only do so much, and they have to be prepared for another atmospheric river. So obviously, the releases are happening now, and they're moving it into reservoirs to the south and so on. So this is just a snapshot of today, and it is very actively managed. I mean, I think the DWRs at and I should say the Bureau of Rec are, they can't let it get too full, right, because of the risk.
Right. And then as far as the decreased snowpack, which was traditionally a very important part of our storage for water and impacts the flows that go through the delta, we also have temperature. We probably might see more challenges related to HABs if this continues. Am I correct?
You are correct to be concerned, but what was I going to say? It's a third of how we deal with water
Right.
supply. The managed releases are, because of their temperature benefits, can also lead to
Some of that as well.
Yeah, adjusting to HABs blooms. So I think HABs are entering the lexicon of water management because they're part of the feedback from when we do releases.
Interesting. Okay, so that's good to know that we're trying to do something with that consideration.
Yeah, people are modeling it. I won't say that it's become operational in that way,
Right.
but it's the impacts are being modeled.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions for Lisa Marie on that agenda item? All right, if not, I'll ask if there's any public comment.
There is no public comment, Madam Chair.
All right. And Lisa Marie, I'll turn it back over to you for introductions on the next agenda item, which is our Healthy Soils Program and rice cultivation in the Delta.
All right, so it is a pleasure to introduce the next presentation on carbon monitoring, which I hope will become a regular council update, as we have many stories to tell and many acres to go in addressing Delta subsidence with land management that includes transitioning to rice agriculture. The LIDAR elevation maps that we just discussed already, they're really pinning down the foundation for continuing to track surface elevations, which is the ultimate constraint on most land use and management choices that we make. As our science programs, Dillon Chapel says, elevation is destiny in the Delta. And I think that leads to some of these decisions. I want to frame this next presentation by Dr. Nina Bingham and Dan Constable in the context of this recent full-day symposium that we had on blue carbon accounting in the Bay Delta. It was supported again by the Coastal and Marine Sciences Institute of UC Davis and the Delta Stewardship Council. It pulled the whole estuary together to assess where we are as a group in carbon accounting and what are next steps that would be most fruitful in scaling up and funding climate benefits by reducing carbon emissions by land use changes. The recording is online and follow-up plans are brewing. And if you watch the YouTube recording, you'll see that we have a really deep bench of talent in the region and a very diverse portfolio of solutions and co-benefits across the whole estuary. With 30 years of work, we've got better measurements, models, and maps for tracking carbon than almost any other estuary, and those data keep getting better with pilot projects that are accelerating across public and private lands, considering a mosaic of management options. This is where rice comes in. Because 80% of our delta is too deeply subsided to restore natural flows, and because we are still shy of entering the carbon market directly, rice agriculture is among the most promising upper estuary interventions for reducing subsidence while still maintaining an agricultural income. So let me turn it over now to our very own environmental program manager, Dan Constable, who just shared with you on the Delta Atlas. He will be providing some policy context and introducing Nina. Thank you both for being here on the dais.
Thank you, and good morning again. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nina Bingham from the Department of Food and Agriculture. Dr. Bingham is going to provide an overview of greenhouse gas emissions, soil health, introduce the Soil Healthies program, and quantifying emissions in the Delta. Today's presentation is a follow-up to a somewhat similar topic, wetlands and methane emissions, that you heard from Dr. Lisa Marie at the September 2025 council meeting, and we heard some interest at that meeting, so we're bringing back a relevant topic. As you will see, elevation emissions in agriculture are very relevant to our work in the Delta and the Delta Plan. Just to highlight a few areas, in Delta Plan Chapter 4, we have a core strategy that includes a focus on safeguarding against land loss. One of our Delta Plan policies, ERP2, is focusing at elevations and maintaining appropriate elevations for restoration. We have a recommendations that looks at funding actions to protect infrastructure from flooding and other natural disasters. And as you just heard, LIDAR elevation is really relevant to flood risk as well. And we have several Delta Plan performance measures. Delta Adapts, our climate change initiative, also includes a core focus on getting a hand on greenhouse gas emissions, as well as some strategies focused specifically on rice cultivation and keeping ag in the Delta while still addressing subsidence, which is a critical issue. The Delta Science Program released a research reward focused on improving subsidence and carbon emissions modeling back in 2025. And so recognizing the importance of all these topics, council staff have become involved in several other relevant initiatives. This includes the Blue Carbon event that you just heard about. We have staff participating in a Delta-focused interagency carbon team, and we also are partnering with the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis, also known as NCES, to convene an upcoming synthesis education and working group focus who's going to include carbon in the Delta. And so today, Dr. Nina Bingham is going to provide an overview of the Delta's role in greenhouse gas emissions and the Healthy Soils Program and its potential to support climate adaptation, improve soil health, and decrease greenhouse gas emissions overall. Dr. Bingham works in the Department of Food and Agriculture Office of Agriculture Resilience and Sustainability as the AB, that's Assembly Bill 32 Scoping Plan Scientist. That's quite an impressive title. In this position, Nina works on all things adaptation and mitigation related for the department, doing cross-agency coordination for agriculture and state climate efforts. And with that, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dan, and thank you to the council for having me. I can advance my own slides, so we'll do that. So today I'm going to cover an introduction to the Healthy Soils Program. This is one of the California Department of Food and Agriculture's flagship climate-smart agricultural incentive programs. And then we're going to really dive into discussing the Delta and why the Healthy Soils Program is incorporating rice cultivation as a new practice. And then we'll just end with a quick look forward to what is coming next for the program. Okay. So since 2014, the Office of Agricultural Resilience and Sustainability in the Department of Food and Ag has been working to build a sustainable and thriving future for California farmers and ranchers. A lot of our work is through incentive programs to adopt climate-smart practices or upgrade or install climate-smart technology on agricultural operations. Our office has awarded almost $730 million through just over 4,000 projects to reduce greenhouse gases from farms, dairies, and ranches, build soil carbon, improve water and energy efficiency, and bolster biodiversity, among other climate and environmental and community benefits. A few years after ORS, so that's our Office of Agriculture Resilience and Sustainability, was started, in 2017, the Healthy Soils Program was initiated as an outcome from the Healthy Soils Initiative. This program is really focused on increasing the adoption of what we call healthy soils practices, or practices which can improve soil health, build soil carbon, and reduce greenhouse gases. You know, that picture I'm showing you right there is of compost application. That's one of our most popular practices. This program, the Healthy Soils Program, helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions from agricultural operations, and it can build soil carbon. And both of these are really critical to meeting our state's climate goals of carbon neutrality and greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2045, in addition to everything that Dan explained in the introduction that's really relevant for helping the Delta. Additionally, the state has nature-based solution targets set we set these in 2022 from AB 1757, and these targets include the implementation of more than 3 million new acres of healthy soils practices by 2045. So our program now has 3 different components. We have incentive grants that provide direct-to-producer funding for healthy soils practices. We have block grants, which facilitate financial assistance to California agricultural operations, and we do this through block grant administrators. These can look like nonprofit organizations, public utilities, mutual water companies, California Native American tribes. All of these are eligible entities to be block grant providers. And these groups will receive funding from CDFA and then coordinate the distribution of funds to farmers and ranchers locally. And then finally, we've also funded demonstration grants to universities, resource conservation districts, and nonprofits to conduct research on innovative practices or showcase healthy soils practices to bolster awareness and education about healthy soils practices. And technical assistance is throughout all of these different components of the Healthy Soils Program. We find that it's really critical to the success of these grants, ensuring that farmers and ranchers who would like to implement these practices have the resources and the knowledge and the technology to do so. Okay, so I'm going to just show you a quick overview of the program's impact, and I can see that maybe on one of the screens it's kind of crazy looking, but that's a map of California. And hopefully if you have slides in your packet, you can see this at a closer take, but we can also share this online. I just want to note that the program's not continuously funded. However, it has received multiple allocations over the years through various bonds, such as Prop 68, and most recently the 2024 Prop 4, or as we're calling it, the 2024 Climate Bond. We've also received general fund and greenhouse gas reduction funding. But since its first solicitation held in 2017, the program has funded more than 1,600 direct grower incentive projects, and through 14 block grants, we funded 640 additional projects. So we've reached more than 7,000 farmers through our demonstration project outreach events as well. And these projects have resulted in millions of tons of greenhouse gas emissions reductions and covered almost 200,000 acres of land across the state. So the map that you're looking at is showing the incentive projects by county from 2017 to 2024. I just want to note that this map does include some of our block grant funded projects, but not all, as when we created the map, they were still sort of being executed. The darker the blue for the counties indicates the more projects. So you can see that we fund most of our projects in our main agricultural regions in the state, the Central Valley and the Imperial Valley. And I've tried to circle the Delta area to really highlight projects funded in those Delta counties for your awareness. Okay, so the Healthy Soils Program, I didn't advance there. The Healthy Soils Program currently funds 29 healthy soils practices for incentives, direct-to-farmer, and block grant programs. These can be compost, cover crop, that kind of thing. But the program is not static in the number of practices eligible for funding. We periodically hold requests for proposals or RFPs to include new practices as eligible for implementation funding. The proposals are reviewed by a subcommittee of subject matter experts evaluated on how suitable this practice would be for California, the benefits, any concerns, and also what is known about the impacts on agriculture and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. The most recent round of new practices introduced to the program through this process included biochar application, prescribed indigenous burning, and a practice specific to the Delta region, resaturating Delta peat soils through rice cultivation. Now, for the rest of my presentation, I'm going to talk about our rice cultivation practice and the motivation behind it and how we're quantifying the benefits and implementation of the process. Okay, so we're going to start with a quick background on Delta soils. And I think most of you are familiar with what I'm going to explain, so we'll skip through it, but we can talk about it later if you want to talk about this more. But for thousands of years, this region has functioned as a tidal marsh, where decaying wetland plants and sediment carried by the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers would be deposited, and that deposited organic matter is then kept from decomposing through relatively anoxic or lack of oxygen conditions of that marsh. This is forming then deep layers of highly organic rich soils. But in the 1850s, with the construction of levees and the draining of land for agriculture, this stopped that deposition and exposed those organic-rich soils to the air, leading to the breakdown of organic matter and subsequent compaction and subsidence of the land. And this breakdown of organic matter is also releasing carbon dioxide, or CO2, a greenhouse gas, back into the atmosphere. Okay, this is not the new updated map, but we can update it later. But this map right here shows that subsidence is not even across the Delta region. And one of the things we've observed is the highest subsidence rates and where the most subsidence has occurred is often associated with regions where the highest organic matter soils occur. These are also places that have been drained a little bit more recently, and this is occurring in the central Delta. As you can see, this map that's been produced by Deverell et al. In 2016, looking at those reds and orange colors. Subsidence here has resulted in land elevations, I think, that they note is more than 24 feet below sea level. Okay, so subsidence along with flooding and sea level rise are increasing that risk of levee failure, and we know that this can impact local communities in the Delta, as well as throughout California, as we also know that the Delta functions as a hub of water systems transmitting water across the state. In addition, the greenhouse gas emissions from the Delta are high given the land area due to that oxidation of those organic rich soils. So what can we do to help mitigate subsidence and greenhouse gas emissions? And specifically, what are solutions that work with communities in the Delta? Agriculture is the main land use in the Delta, and it's also a cultural backbone. So we're looking for solutions that work for both the people and the land. That's really key to us. So this is where resaturating the Delta peat soils through rice cultivation comes in. I'm clicking it. Okay. Nope, we clicked too far now. I gotta chill out. Okay, we're back. The practice of converting to rice cultivation in the Delta is intended to re-wet drained agricultural land in the Delta for the majority of the year. First through rice cultivation during the growing season, and then habitat creation in the winter. By re-wetting this landscape, we can mimic the low to no oxygen conditions of that marsh prior to the creation of its levees and the draining of the land, and this can help reduce decomposition of the organic matter, slowing or stopping subsidence and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Bringing on a new practice into the Healthy Soils program, though, means we need to constrain how it's implemented, understand the impacts, and identify a reasonable payment rate for this practice. To achieve this process, my department and the Air Resources Board staff have worked together to compile a literature review to assess practice impact on the environment, and we also utilized existing programs funding similar practices, consulted with those program managers, also subject matter experts at the University of California, other departments and conservancies, and also growers to work on creating practice implementation guidelines and determine reimbursement rates. Okay. I'm going to dive in a little on the expected greenhouse gas emissions reductions from converting from irrigated row crop agriculture, thinking about growing something like corn, to growing rice. We compiled research that measured greenhouse gases from agricultural fields in the Delta on a variety of crops, including rice. We determined a baseline condition, which is considered the business as usual agricultural emissions from crops such as corn and alfalfa and land used for pasture. And then we compared it against values in the literature from rice. And what we found is that growing rice creates around 6 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per hectare per year reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to dive into that number a little bit. Carbon dioxide equivalence is one of the standard ways that we express the climate impact of any greenhouse gases. In the case of agriculture in the Delta, the major greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide from oxidizing organic matter and nitrous oxide from soil with frequent fertilization and irrigation. We can determine CO2 equivalents to show the total impact of these greenhouse gases by multiplying non-CO2 greenhouse gases by a value that reflects how much global warming potential they have specific to carbon dioxide. So 6 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per hectare per year expresses the expected greenhouse gas emissions reductions over an area and a time, which is a hectare and a year. In terms of management guidelines and reimbursement rates, we're fortunate not to be the first program to fund the conversion of row crop agriculture in the Delta to rice. And thus we worked really closely with folks at the Delta Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy to learn from their program that was launched in 2024, which was the Delta Rice Conversion Incentive Program. We talked with them a lot about what worked and what was helpful. This practice is intended for very organic rich soils in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta only, with the practice constrained to areas with mapped soil units classified as highly organic mineral soil or organic soils only. The general guidelines are for the field to remain flooded for approximately 8 months of the year, including during the growing season, and then over the winter to create habitat for wildlife. The rice straw is left in the field but not tilled into the organic rich soil, and this is mostly to help with food and habitat for wildlife. And then we also hope to expect growers who convert to rice to continue in rice cultivation for at least 5 years, and we're looking at a reimbursement rate that would be one time and about $800 per acre. I just want to note that all of this is going to be covered in a white paper that's expected to come out at a later date from our department, and I'm more than willing to share that around when it is released. Okay, so I I just want to leave you with the note that the Healthy Soils Program is preparing a new block grant solicitation utilizing 2024 climate bond funds. Program staff have been hard at work preparing guidelines for the solicitation and the eligible practices, including this new practice, rice cultivation in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. So please keep tuned for any announcements with that program. And with that, I just want to thank you for having me, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right. Diane?
Thank you. So are a lot of these folks converting from another crop to rice?
Yes, that's right. That's
And
what this
like I saw, there was corn and other high emission crops because they require higher fertilizer inputs, frequent irrigation, and land disturbance.
Yes.
So it's my understanding that often farmers rotate crops. And so you're saying that they're expected to do this for 5 years, but they only get one time, they get 800 per acre. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this reimbursement rate would largely pay for the conversion, any of the like land shaping and you need to do to set your land up for rice, but it's not going to continue to pay for like the implementation of rice.
And so are there other incentives on the federal or state level for these types of crops?
There might be, I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious because, I've been watching kind of the market for rice and it does fluctuate. And for farmers, they're trying to make a living. So I want to make sure that they're doing it. The other question I have is related to the amount of water needed to grow rice. Is that significantly higher than other crops? Is it the same?
I don't want to say something incorrect here.
Okay.
But
All right.
what I have heard is that rice grown in the Delta is maybe a little more viable than rice grown in other areas of the state, given the access and proximity to flowing water.
Okay. And then, there was one other thing I was looking at. Yeah, I just, the other thing is rice is really the only crop that kind of meets those needs of, other than tules. And so I know that there's been discussion about a market for that kind of a product, but it hasn't really been pursued or promoted. Is that correct? I don't know if this is even in your sphere, but I'm just, I'm hearing, I want to make sure that our farmers can continue to do things, that we are working on the greenhouse gas emissions and working towards improving the subsidence situation and all of those things. So I've just been, and I'm a layperson, so I can say things that I don't even know what I'm talking about, and But I really think that there needs to be additional options, particularly if they need to rotate or if the market isn't there for rice.
Yeah, totally agree. I would love to see more research and trials of different aquatic crops that could serve as this function. That would be really cool.
Right.
Rice is sort of a very known entity, but even within the Delta, there's a lot of practices that maybe you would think about are common up in the northern Sacramento Valley that we just don't have actually the research trials on in the Delta yet. So it's still an evolving thing, and I know there's some really great extension folks working in the Delta working on this and thinking about this, and I think that they're trialing a lot of different things, so we can keep tuned for that.
Thank you.
Thanks. One of the things I learned at the Blue Carbon Symposium was that the Delta wetlands carbon density is 50% higher than other areas. So is that one of the reasons that you guys are targeting this effort here? And then also, is this program available to farmers in other places, or are you just looking specifically at farmers in the Delta?
The practice will be constrained to the Delta. And that is specifically because this is a region where we have these really, really high organic matter soils, and that's what's driving these higher greenhouse gas emissions and also subsidence. But the Healthy Soils Program is available statewide. This time it'll be through block grant administrators, so the region that our block grants will be serving.
Got it, okay. And then, are there other benefits to re-wetting the soil besides reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Like, does the leaving the rice and tamping it down help, like, with subsidence reversal in any way, or?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that we think it can really help stop or slow subsidence, because it's going to stop that oxidation of the organic matter, which is contributing to the subsidence. So it's not just going to be a greenhouse gas emissions reducing process, it's going to be a subsidence slower or stopper, which we're really excited about. There is also like a wildlife benefit. The Delta serves as a major, I think, overwintering spot for a lot of birds, and so we're really excited through flooding through the winter to be able to offer that kind of habitat for birds and other species.
Got it. And then, have you run up against any arguments against or resistance to switching to rice, or is it seemed pretty, people are receptive to that?
Well, this is an incentive program, so we're not requiring people to do this. This would be people who are interested in doing it. So largely, we haven't faced really a lot of opposition in that way. I think if we were requiring it, we might hear a bit more about things, but this is totally voluntary, so people who want to partake in this.
Great. All right. And I see Councilmember Eggman has her hand up.
Hi. I just wanted to say that I love this program. I had the opportunity, I don't know, a decade ago maybe, to fly around with Dino Cortopazzi, who was a big farmer out in the Delta and was a big proponent of growing rice rather than corn. I mean, that's an individual who did a ton for California agriculture and lived and worked in the Delta area. So for me, the rice is a win-win-win, both for the wetlands, that habitat is already out there and people are flocking to it, helps hugely with the subsidence, and then with the organic matter. So way better than corn, and rice is one of the most consumed things in the world. And California has a really rigorous and not rigorous, but healthy rice commission. So anyway, they travel around, and it is a big seller for the council member who asked, "Is there a market for rice?"
Excellent. Thank you for that input. All right. Any other questions for the panel? Nope. Anything else, Lisa Marie, from them?
No, I'm done. Thank you so much, Shirley.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. Fascinating. Love the presentation. Do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. And next up, we're going to invite Jeff Henderson and Joel Metzger to talk about the California Water Plan.
All right, good morning, council members. As we know, California's water system is under some real pressure. Climate extremes, aging infrastructure, growing demands. SB 72 recently required updates to the California Water Plan to make it more action-focused, including establishing the state's first water supply target of 9 million acre-feet by 2040. Because the Delta is so central to both our water supply and our ecosystem health, aligning the water plan with the Delta plan is essential. Today, we'll briefly cover where the water plan stands, how SB 72 is shaping its direction, and how early coordination between DWR and the Council can strengthen both statewide water supply planning and Delta plan implementation. So I'd like to welcome Joel Metzger, who was recently appointed a Deputy Director at DWR responsible for statewide water resources planning, including leading the California Water Plan update. Joel will cover the first portion of the presentation, and then I'll close out by describing key relationships to the Delta Plan and the Council's work. Let's get started. Welcome, Joel.
Thanks, Jeff. It's nice to be here, and nice to see many of you for the first time. I wanted to briefly introduce myself, and then I can jump into talking about the water plan. So I am the newest Deputy Director at DWR, and I am over statewide water resources planning. I work on the water plan. I also work on integrated water resources management, or IRWM, watershed resilience, trying to prioritize that more, and then a lot of work on Proposition 4, writing guidelines for watershed funding, brackish desalination funding, and some other technical assistance. It's been a whirlwind of 9 months so far. I'm learning an incredible amount every day and meeting so many people and understanding all of the challenges and opportunities that we have across California. And it's been a really wonderful experience so far. Prior to this job, I was a general manager of a water supply and hydropower agency in the Sierra Nevada foothills in Calaveras County, called Utica Water and Power Authority, near Calaveras Big Trees, near New Maloney's Reservoir, kind of up in the Gold Country area. And prior to that, I worked for a countywide water agency, Calaveras County Water District. So about 12, 13 years in the water industry. And prior to that, I was a journalist. I was a reporter and then editor-in-chief for about 6 years. And so communications continue to be something that I really value and something that I hope to infuse in the water plan development. And as we have strategies, how we communicate those out to decision makers and the public across the state. So with that, let's go to the next slide. Okay, that's me. So today, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the water plan and its history. Talk about SB 72, which was a Caballero bill, Senator Caballero from the San Joaquin Valley, and how that changes the water plan and modernizes it. We'll also talk about how we have started to coordinate with Jessica Pearson and her team, and how we plan to continue coordinating as we develop the plan. And I think we'd love to also hear your early ideas on ways that we could work together and make sure that Delta is a central point of this updated plan in 2028 and beyond. So on this slide, I just want to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing, which really led to why people across the state worked on SB 72 and how they drove that to be unanimously approved by the Assembly, Senate, and then signed by Governor Newsom last year. So you can see we have ecosystem pressures, shifting demand, aging infrastructure. These are all things that I personally worked on as a general manager, but that we're facing across the state. I want to focus on climate extremes today for just a minute. So what we are experiencing right now is a more and more unreliable snowpack. And our state has really developed and invested billions of dollars with a water system that relies on a snowpack that is reliable. And so on average, the Sierra snowpack has been about 15 million acre feet a year. And that's 3 Shasta reservoirs, or enough for millions and millions of homes and acres of land and environmental flows. And more recently, we've seen more and more extremes on that snowpack. And even this year, which total precip is close to average, we're seeing 1% or more of the snow melting every day with these high temperatures that we are experiencing. And the snowpack is likely going to be gone very soon. In fact, the next snow survey could be just a muddy field. We may not have any snow in that area. And so if we're not going to get that 15 million acre feet of snowpack on average, then our system is not going to work. And we're not going to have enough water for all of the needs in California, whether that be environmental needs, agricultural, urban, tribal, recreational, all of these things that we care about in the state. And so the biggest challenge that we're working on, and I think why this was pushed forward as a piece of legislation, is that challenge. If we're getting less snow and we're getting more rain, and those storms are bigger and more intense, and they're shifting to different times of the year, how are we able to plan to have a reliable water supply for the things that are important to us as Californians? And the existing system is not going to get us that. And that is really the driver of this plan, is uncertain water reliability now, models that show it's going to get more uncertain, and a desire to create the future that California wants based on the priorities that we develop. And so that's the moment that we're in right now. Let's go to the next slide. The water plan has evolved over the years. It started as Bulletin 3 in 1957, and since then, it has been released about every 5 years per the Water Code. The very first plan, and I should have brought it, I have a copy of it on my desk, It was really an action plan. It looked at a bunch of water projects across the state, and that plan led to the state water project that we see today. So that's Oroville Reservoir, that's the canals going south to California Aqueduct, and then some of the branches going out to the coast and to the Bay Area. And then, going over the Tehachapis down by Bakersfield, splitting in the east and west branch and heading down into northern LA and all the way to San Diego. And so while everything in that plan wasn't built, that very much was an infrastructure-focused plan and an action plan. And then over the years, the plan did evolve significantly. And in recent years, the 2023 plan being the most recent, we focused on equity and tribal and watersheds. And so this plan generally is a little bit of a backward-looking plan. What has occurred? What has happened? What's the status of water in California? With some soft recommendations, but there hasn't really been enforcement, accountability, or teeth in the plan. And so SB 72 is going to change some of that. So where does the Delta fit in? So much of California water goes through the Delta. It is a central point, as you all know so well, much better than me. And the Delta Plan provides statutory policy framework, science-based guidance, performance measures, and I would say in the past, DWR may not have coordinated as fully with this team as we hope to moving forward. And so I think that the key to making sure that we're working well together as a team is talking early and often, and making sure that the DWR team, and I have a really great team, they're really excited about this opportunity to modernize the plan, but we want to make sure that they understand what the Delta Stewardship Council team is doing, and also vice versa. And so we have had one meeting already. It was mainly focused on DWR sharing what we're up to. We are going to have another meeting soon where we're really going to hear from the Delta Stewardship Council staff, and I hope this is the beginning of a strong partnership all the way through. All right, so where are we going? So a little more on SB 72. It was introduced 2 years ago as SB 366 by Senator Caballero. It did pass unanimously through the Assembly and Senate, and it got vetoed. It came back again last year, and with some modifications, also passed unanimously through the Assembly and Senate. This time it was signed by the governor on October 1st with a signing message emphasizing the importance of moving this forward, which is somewhat rare for legislation to get a signing message. The focus is on implementation, on action, and enhanced coordination and partnership, including what we're doing here today. And there were some additional mandates put in, which I'm going to talk about. The one that most people are asking us about is the 9 million acre-foot storage water supply target for 2040. This is an interim target. It will be replaced in the 2033 plan with new targets that we will work on at the watershed level, at the HUC 8 level, which is hydrologic unit code. There are 140 of those in the state. So we're going to need in the next 8 or so years to really get that technical work done and have those more localized targets. But for now, there's a 9 million acre-foot target of additional water supply by 2040. And that's what will be in the 2028 plan. Additionally, we're going from a backward-looking plan to a forward-looking plan, more actions, and the consultation is being expanded significantly. So this is a quick look at that 9 million acre feet. So in the water code now, we are given some tools and levers that we could look at to plan for that target. So one is new water storage facilities on the surface, groundwater recharge, water conservation and recycling, stormwater capture, desalination, water conveyance, water transfers, and demand management. And when we say demand management, what we're talking about is repurposing land that is currently in production. And so that could be really the San Joaquin Valley is the area that is really facing the biggest cutbacks due to sustainable groundwater management, or SGMA implementation. And so as some of that land comes out of production, that is going to go toward these goals. I think there are other strategies that aren't shown here or listed specifically. We will be looking at those as well. One of them is forest management and how that can create additional water supply and also have a lot of other benefits if we don't have as many catastrophic wildfires and overstocked unhealthy forests. There is a robust engagement structure that we have already created, and many of these meeting opportunities are coming up in the next month or two. So this really great team that works with me at DWR is in the center. And then top left, we have our state agency partners. That is where the Stewardship Council is going to fit in. We already have an executive level rep and a program level rep, and our first meeting will be on the 30th of April. We're looking forward to that. We'll be meeting regularly, probably around quarterly, and briefing all of our state partners on our plan, our approach, our understanding. And just so you know where we're coming from, we want to learn from our state agency partners. What are you up to? What are you working on? Let's not reinvent the wheel. And how do we integrate and fit together to have a plan that we can all get behind and have buy-in? Also, the Water Commission is specifically mentioned in Water Code with SB 72. So we are presenting to them on a regular basis with updates. They also collaborated with us on the advisory committee consideration and nomination process. And speaking of the advisory committee, that is in the Water Code as well. We will form an advisory committee, and there's a certain number of folks that have to be on there, perspectives that have to be represented. So we made sure that we had all of those covered. And then beyond that, we wanted to make sure the state was covered geographically and that we had as many perspectives as we could. And so we have nominated and appointed that advisory committee. Their first meeting will be May 13th and 14th. At the DoubleTree in Sacramento, and it's a public meeting, so anyone can attend that and listen in. And then finally, we're going to do regional workshops across the state, and those will be public listening sessions where we'll provide updates and we'll hear from folks about the water plan. Supporting the advisory committee, we'll form caucuses, which will be bigger groups of people who are diving into specific issues like groundwater affordability, the environment, things of that nature. There's a tribal work group that Anacita is leading with DWR. That will also support a tribal member that is on the advisory committee, and we have a technical work group really looking at our models and methods. So what is 9 million acre feet when you just think about how much water that is? Well, it's like 2 Shasta reservoirs, 2.5 Oroville's, 3.5 New Maloney's, enough for 18 million households, if you assume a half acre foot per household a year, or 2.5 million acres of farmland, depending on crop type. It's a very large amount of water. So how are we going to get there? Well, we want to coordinate and consult, just like what we're doing today, and as we plan to through the engagement strategy. I think a lot of the work is going to go through that advisory committee and the caucuses supporting it. So I really encourage folks across the state to join a caucus and be involved in that. We will be providing reports publicly through many different avenues. A lot of it's going to come out on CaliforniaWaterPlan.com, which is our new website that we just launched. And then these groups are going to make recommendations to DWR, which we will consider, and in many cases, we will incorporate recommendations into the new water plan. And here's that engagement structure once again. Just a little look in blue about what's new in SB 72 that wasn't in the Water Code before. Tribes are specifically mentioned. Labor is added as a representative on the advisory committee, and then environmental justice is specifically mentioned. It was not mentioned before. Caucuses likely will fall into the regional, let's say a Sacramento Valley caucus, a Sierra Nevada Foothills caucus, a South Coast caucus. And also we're looking at issue-based caucuses, which would really focus in on something like groundwater, other issues. We welcome your feedback on what caucuses might make sense. And we're going to take these ideas to the advisory committee in May, talk it over with them, get their input, and then we'll be forming those caucuses hopefully by June. And then here are just some of the partners that we've already briefed. You can see a lot of state agency logos there on the left, and there are many others who also want to be involved. I think we're going to have a pretty big group of state agencies. We also have federal agencies that want to be involved, so that's like the Army Corps, the Bureau of Reclamation, USDA, and others. And then a real quick look at our approach. This is really looking toward 2033, where we do the deeper dive. We're going to look at our data, our targets, and our actions. So very high level. Our data has issues right now. We need to improve our confidence, and we need new tools to really understand the water data that's coming in. Once we do, at that HUC 8 level, We're going to do a climate change overlay and model out to the future to 2040, 2050, and end of century. And the idea is that with these future scenarios, we'll understand what are the gaps between water supply and demand for that particular watershed. And then for the 2033 plan, instead of the 9 million acre feet target, we'll replace it with a stacked up version of all of those gaps statewide for each watershed, and that will be the new target statewide, but also for the individual regions. And then the actions would be climate adaptation strategies. So now that we know what the gap is likely going to be, what should you be thinking about doing about it at the local level? And we want to really give some good strategies and do a benefit cost analysis of those and provide that to local water managers. And this is what the HUC 8 scale looks like over on the right. That's where we're going to get to in 2033. On the left, you can see hydrologic regions, which is kind of the scale we have worked at historically. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Joel. So a little bit about our interactions here between the Delta Plan and the Water Plan. Ultimately, they're aiming at the same outcomes. For the Delta, alignment here means advancing ecosystem restoration, improving water supply reliability, and building climate resilience through multi-benefit watershed-based projects. Today, our focus is confirming where the two frameworks already line up and where tighter coordination can make a difference. Across both efforts, we share the same core priorities: restoring ecosystem function, supporting reliability, strengthening climate resilience, improving watershed health, and advancing regional multi-benefit projects. The key is establishing alignment on direction first before we get into specific approaches. Once that's clear, we can anchor it in the Water Plan through the Delta Plan's adopted performance measures. So, and I should point out, the state law requires the Delta Plan to incorporate performance measures. For the 2028 update, the approach is straightforward. Reference the relevant Delta Plan targets, ensure consistency with the Delta Plan's policy framework, and align statewide discussions with Delta priorities. This gives us a consistent yardstick to track progress and adjusting course, and improves accountability and coherence across statewide planning. Under that foundation, SB 72 provides a timely opportunity for us here at the Council to help shape how these measures guide implementation. SB 72 also moves the Water Plan closer to action, creating an opening to ensure Delta priorities are fully represented. That starts with early alignment on performance measures, early input on relevant planning topics, and connecting those measures to implementation pathways through existing coordination forums, not new ones. Forums like the Delta Plan Interagency Coordination Committee, or DPIC, already bring the right agencies together to potentially support this work. To keep coordination efficient, we're proposing a lightweight set of pathways that build on what already works: ongoing staff-level coordination between DWR and the Council, use of the Interagency Coordination Committee, and participation in the Advisory Committee and state agency coordination meetings that Joel discussed. The guiding principle here is clear. Don't create new structures unless absolutely necessary. What we need from today is clarity on the Delta topics that should be prioritized within these pathways, and what engagement pace makes the most sense. With that structure in place, we feel the Council is well positioned to stay closely connected to the Water Plan, to help shape planning discussions, influence implementation pathways, and ensure adopted performance measures in the Delta Plan remain central as things evolve. Working through those established relationships allows us to contribute meaningfully while keeping the process streamlined and focused, and that is our objective. So thank you for having us here today to talk about the Water Plan. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks, Jeff. Can I, before I ask for members' input, could you clarify on slide that's on page 23? It says the state law requires the Water Plan to incorporate the adopted Delta performance measures, but then you said the law requires the Delta Plan. So I want to clarify.
That's correct. It was a correction to a previous version of the presentation. The Delta plan is required by the water code to incorporate performance measures, and thus we have our established performance measures in the Delta plan.
Okay, so the state law doesn't require the water plan to include those adopted Delta performance measures?
That's my understanding.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So it's just like a typo. Okay, all right, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that. All right, members, and, oh, yes, Maria.
I have two questions. One for Joel. In that engagement and coordination architecture, you talked about
Could you please move closer to the
California
mic?
Water Commission, and I was wondering if the State Quality Control Board comes in and where in this equation at all. That was my first question.
So we are including them or inviting them to participate in kind of the state agency team. And so they, through the state board, through EPA and others, can either be represented or directly participate in that way.
Because I'm just thinking that in all these efforts, recycling and reuse and all that, water quality becomes more and more of an important issue, and therefore it's going to be on the map all the time. And so they coming through, you said, the Water Commission?
So they would be involved in the state agency team. We also have Eric Ekdahl with the State Water Board as an ex officio member on the advisory committee. So there'll be a couple points of entry there.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was, just because at different parts of the state, we hear water plans. I mean, there's a county water plan, LACD water plan, and you talked about these hydrologic areas, and I'm trying to understand, and this question keeps come up in the water industry meetings of how do all this coordinate? Do they tie into each other? Should they, or can they? Could you just shed some light on that, of how you see it?
So Director Namath, who I work for, has talked about this plan as the great integrator, if we do it right, and that would really have all the information on the table and have a really clear plan for integrating that information, both at the federal level, the state level, the regional level, and down to the local and community level. And I would say from personal experience that in the past, the water plan hadn't always been integrated into things like strategic plans at the local level. It had not, even though it had a lot of good information. And so I think one of the KPIs for our team, or key performance indicators of success, would be if we do start seeing local plans looking to the water plan and integrating some of those statewide goals in, so we have alignment from the state all the way down to the local. I think that would be a really valuable change from what we've experienced in the past. The other thing is, you just mentioned it, there's so much good planning work that's already out there, and we don't want to reinvent that wheel. And I think that's why we as a team are so committed to engagement and asking questions and listening, especially on the front end. So we know what's out there, and that we look for ways to not reinvent the wheel or have a new meeting, but just use the existing infrastructure, integrate it, make connections where people may be in silos and it would make sense for them not to be, and then try to put that together in a way that makes sense, not in a really highly technical way, but in kind of a layman's terms way that's really easy to digest and really easy to get your head around. So I think that is a big part of our goal, is that great integrator strategy that I hear from Director Namath.
Sure, and just one more, just because, and I'm not trying to see that this plan is an answer to all the questions, but for example, there are regions that created more recycled water than they need, or in a region that they're planning to do it, but they don't know where to store it. So I'm trying to see who watches all that, and is this plan, or we shouldn't put too much in one big plan and say that in this region where they created all this recycled water that they can't use, something was not calculated right? I mean, although there's always the way to sell that water, extra water, but then it has its own problems. So if you could comment on that.
You know what comes to mind when you mention that is like the San Diego County Water Authority. And
That's what I had in mind.
okay.
Going to create this big project next, and it's going to create all this water, and we still don't know where it's going to get stored. It has to go up, come down. I mean, the conveyance system for it, it's going to be so if you could comment on, just because you have a bigger view of the state.
Just real quickly, San Diego County Water Authority, they had trends and projections, and they did a good plan, and they were expecting a lot of growth and a lot of water use, and they really invested. They made deals with Imperial Irrigation District to line canals and get water delivered through LA's system. They also built the Carlsbad desalination plant and other big investments, and that has led to a lot of water reliability for them. In fact, more water than they need now, because the demand has actually dropped off. Population hasn't grown as much as they expected, and so they didn't end up needing all of that water. It's also led to an affordability challenge, where that's some of the most expensive water anywhere in the state of California for the average customer. And so now you're looking at them look for other folks who might take some of that water, and they are making some agreements, even just recently, with some other regional folks. So I think that that's an example of one area that really overinvested in a way, and then the trends didn't end up staying where they thought. A lot of things changed. And that's going to be our challenge too. A model is always wrong, but some of them are useful. And so we're going to do our best to model these weather extremes and climate change and what that might do or not do. But I mean, honestly, everything's a range. Like even the 9 million acre feet, some of what was looked at by the bill author was a range of 4 million to 9 million acre feet of reduced water supply. So we don't really know exactly what is going to happen. I think what we want to do is we want to make sure all of the best science and the best minds are coming together, and that we have the best models that are useful, and then that we plan proactively, and that we get ahead of some of these issues that we're already experiencing with the volatility of our weather patterns and our snowpack going away. And if we don't do that, we need to understand clearly and communicate what is the cost of inaction for the environment, for tribes, recreation, ag, urban, for our whole state, for our economy. And I think that as long as we have an open and honest and transparent conversation, we can arrive on what our goals are, what's important to us, and then we can say, we're going to all buy in to work toward these targets. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. These are very difficult things to understand, but that's our goal.
Yeah, and one last question. And you think that you do have certain type of experiences, wisdom, lessons learned, because you're looking at it at such a macro level for local and regional agencies? You do?
Yeah, so in terms of like how we're looking at things, I do think that we are often too focused about what's going on in our own backyard and our own silo, and I think that we are going to need folks to look at the statewide goals, even if there isn't a direct benefit to them. And then I think that when we understand what those are, then how does that fit into local projects, and how can things like backbone infrastructure, like the State Water Project and the federal Central Valley Project, how does that fit in and support to big initiatives like groundwater recharge and watershed resilience and things of that nature. But I do think that we do bring a perspective that only DWR can bring as the statewide water agency with planning purview and operating at that level. There is no other plan that looks at it in this way.
And I wish that would be given to, and I'm sure you said that because it could really give perspective and context to what these regions are doing.
Yes.
Right? Maybe ahead of time, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Maria. Councilmember Zingali.
Thanks. Joel, I was interested in the addition of environmental justice, and just wondering if you know the impetus for that, and then what concretely does that mean? Like, how will that manifest?
So I think that these are perspectives that we have engaged with consistently for many years, decades, but they just weren't in the water code. So I think if anything, since there was a big change in general, it was important to not only have DWR engage with those perspectives, but have it written in the water code. Tribes is another one that I think was important. So I think those are really good adds. And then in terms of what that means, it's not going to be new. We've already been working with these folks and these perspectives. We had them on advisory committees in the past. But now, as we form advisory committees for 2028, and that has been formed and they're forward, that's a guarantee that those perspectives will always be represented on those committees and be at the table. And so I think that while it has been happening, now it's more formalized in water code.
Good, thank you.
Thanks. Diane?
Thank you. I think this is my first time really getting exposed to this, getting to think about it. So the first question I have is this framework of, I want to make sure I use the right wording, the interim planning target of 9 million acre feet by 2040. So is that additional? Is that based on what we have and then kind of making what is that number?
So in the water code, it calls it additional water supply.
So it is additional. Okay.
It is, and that number came from a couple different efforts to try to think, due to climate change and other factors, what water supply might our state lose and not have available to us? And so there were a couple efforts, one by DWR, our state climatologist, Dr. Mike Anderson, for the hotter, drier strategy. He put some numbers out, and then also Dr. Jay Lund with UC Davis did a study that looked at not just climate change, but other factors and what water supply may no longer be available due to those factors. And so that's really where that number came from. But it's interesting that the water code didn't set a clear baseline, and it also didn't talk about firm dry year demand versus average year demand, or wet year demand, or storage capacity versus the firm yield. And those are very different things. And so our team is spending a lot of time understanding that there is some level of interpretation there. And so we're really diving into that 9 million acre foot number. And we have some approaches that we're going to bring to that advisory committee meeting on the 13th and 14th of May. And we're going to start talking through that to make sure that we're clear on what is the baseline, and then what does that additional water supply mean. And so that way we can have a transparent, open discussion and reach consensus and then move forward in that direction.
And so, again, this is me, I always kind of think of someone that's never watched this is their learning, and I'm still learning too. So that 9 million acre feet, has that been discussed on where that's needed specifically? Is it, certain areas of the state? Is it distributed evenly? What's the distribution of that new additional water?
So where that is needed and how it might be distributed is not spelled out in the water code. So we'll be talking through that as a state in the coming months.
And then I see all these tools. Has there been any forecasting, speculation, or kind of discussion on what percentage of these would be more productive or focused on?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I will say that hopefully on day 2 of the first AC meeting,
You'll have it all
advisory
figured
committee, we'll at least be able to give kind of like a high level. We're going to tell you about groundwater.
Right.
Here's the state of affairs with groundwater. Here are the opportunities. Here are the challenges. Here's how Sigma plays in. And we'll do that for each one of those strategies. And I think that first 2-day meeting is really about foundational awareness of how the state kind of developed, how it works, and where it fits together, how connected we are, and then the challenges we're facing, the opportunities, and the strategies. And then the big decision point will be what caucuses can we form and facilitate to support the work of the advisory committee. And that's going to be a big decision point for them to kind of tell us what they need. And then we really dive into caucus work, and we start coming back to the advisory committee with much more detailed deep dives into some of those strategies.
Yeah. I really appreciated Maria's questions, because there is a lot of competition between, all of these efforts, and sometimes we don't get to really appreciate the whole value of, say, recycled water or, whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how we do that, because, like you said, it gets more expensive, and that's another data point that we have to consider. Lastly, back to council member Zingali, I always forget it, Maria, board or whatever. I really hope that as we progress through this, the tribes are not just a check mark, but are actually embraced. And, we talk about our science board and, we talk about mitigation and all of that. And, typically we say, well, if this project harms this thing, scientifically, we can do this thing to fix it. It's not that easy with people and with cultures and with all of that. So I'm hoping that we will get better at that. And I appreciate that. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, I have one couple of questions. For the advisory committee, are those members listed publicly somewhere?
They are. So if you go to californiawaterplan.com and you click on public engagement and you scroll down, you'll see Meet the Advisory Committee. Click on that and you'll see the name, title, organization for each person. Soon you'll see a photo and a bio for each one.
Great. And do you feel like there's good representation from the Delta, from that 27 million people in California get their water from the Delta? It's probably really important to have good representation on there.
We absolutely had that as part of our conversation, and we did our best to have a strong representation for the Delta. But I will say, and just want to be very candid, 38, 36 people to represent all of California and all the interests. There will be some gaps. And while certainly we are very responsive to the water code, and I think we have a really strong advisory committee, I just want to recognize that where we do have those gaps or where the sitting appointed members aren't able to fully represent a perspective, I'm committed to, I want to hear about that. I want to know who we could bring in and get the information in front of the AC that's needed, because I don't want there to be any gaps in their understanding of the decision points. So if we are not meeting the mark on the Delta, let me know, and we'll find a way to get that information brought forward.
Great. Well, thanks. We really appreciate your presentation.
You bet.
All right. Yes, Gail.
I do think just on this council, thank you for letting us know who it is. I think it's probably worth considering kind of a commensurate representation for folks and where the water is coming from. So you might just want to consider, as you look at this, a more commensurate opportunity for Delta communities to speak. If I'm reading it correctly, I think the only representative is Supervisor Hume. So just a thought as you just transparently consider all the ways that that we do drive towards the goal of consensus. Obviously, that's very difficult in water and in California, but I do think often having the right people at the table is helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think it emphasizes how important the partnership with the council is going to be going forward on it too. Like, if there is somewhat of a gap, hopefully we can help fill it. Yep. All right, any public comment?
There is no public comment, Madam Chair. Sorry.
All right, thanks, Emma. All right, well, thanks for being here. We appreciated it. Wonderful presentation. In preparation for our next council meeting, we anticipate that it's going to take place on April 23rd or 24th, but please refer to our posted meeting notices for further information or updates in case we do make any changes to that going forward. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.